Pushkin.
He's just such a fangirl for.
He's not gonna own it at this point.
He's like, he's cool. Yeah,
he's probably playing it cool though.
I think so because he knows we're gonna roast him about it all the time.
That's so funny. Cool. Yeah, no, but I'm happy. I'm happy this worked out to do too though, because I'm like, as soon as the album got announced, I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
That's what I also felt. This is the most crazy thing that I've ever heard when his son asked me to produce it. So yeah.
Is that the origin of the?
Mm-hmm.
So it was going to be more you producing a Milton?
Well, in the same moment that his son was like, "Oh, you should produce this record," he said it should be Milton and Esperanza. He framed it as like, "Oh, it'll be a duo project. You know, you and him should do this project together, and you produce it." And I mean, when you revere somebody's work that much, it felt hard to almost like insert myself into the like palette of sounds. You know, maybe I felt an initial temptation as a producer, just kind of like, I just want to bring stuff together and just, you know, bask in the glory of your songs and your sound. But Milton and his son were like, no, you know, we're gonna do it together. It's gotta be your stuff too. It's gotta be what you want and da 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 da. So that actually made it scarier, I think, because it's kind of like, it's almost like a challenge to the mentee or the younger person. Like, can you stand by what you've developed up to this point in your musical life, you know, and consider it a contribution to the same global canon of music as your, you know, mentor. And because that felt like that feels like it's always the invitation with every next generation. Like, you can't just keep, you know, revering and bowing to and like, you know, holding on this like silver holy platter. I don't know, the works of the ones before you. Like, you have to sit in and live in and find out about what you've made inspired by them, you know? Yeah.
It was initially just maybe supposed to be just you producing a Milton record, but then it sort of...
No, it was, his son always framed it as, you produce the record and it's going to be you and him. I just found that scary, you know, as a conceit of like, oh, it's going to be both of our music or both of our kind of, you know, aesthetic voice or presence on the album. I felt intimidating as a conceit, as a producer, and also as like a person who's so inspired by him and feels so affected by his body of work, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you collaborated also very closely with Wayne Shorter, who the album's dedicated to. Did it feel, I mean, I guess, and are you just not used to, are you not yet used to working so closely alongside your hero? Or is that something you just never grow accustomed to when you revere people?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds like there's just this long line of people on the level of Wayne and Milton that like you could go, you know, like, oh, and then next you'll go work with, to me, those two people are like my number one and number two. It's not in any hierarchy of order, but really in the history of music that's affected me, that I've loved most deeply and studied the deepest, Wayne and Milton are it, you know?
Yeah.
So this weird kind of like timing, I guess, of working so closely with Wayne for approximately a decade on this opera project. And then in the year that Wayne passes, this project with Milton coming up, that I don't know what to say about that. I think that's the first time I maybe said that sequence of events out loud, and I don't know what to do with that. I don't even know how to process that, because, you know, I know these humans, you know, they are people that I love and revere as folks, you know, people that I know, that I talk to and call and know. And also they are two of the profoundest musicians to ever walk the earth. just period. And the circumstances that conspired for me to even know them and to even meet them, connect with them, and then get through these projects are just ridiculous. Like it's unbelievable. So all that to say, no, I'm not accustomed to working with people like Wayne Shorter and Milton, because there aren't people like Wayne Shorter and Milton. They are both so singular. And yeah, I getting to know both of them in the different ways and the different journeys that brought me to both of them have just been miracles of my life. You know what I mean? And when the opportunities opened, or the invitations really, I'll say, came for me to work with them, I just said yes. What, not really asking like, am I ready for this? Am I equipped to do this? I just said yes because I love them, you know. And
how could you say no?
How could you say no? And that's what I can say about that. So yeah, also I don't want to like conflate the two of them, because working with them with their own very distinct journeys and projects and pretexts, but it's really something. So it's like a perpetual kind of like dual state of existence, where you're like, okay, there's this person in front of me, we got this work to do, we're just trying to figure out the key for this song, or like, you know, whatever is the detail in front of you. And then the other part of you is like, oh my God, this is Milton Nascimento, you know.
Yeah.
Just trying to actually stay present and not swoon and like faint at the immensity of your hero sitting in the room with you, you know. So
I'd imagine the details, like focusing on the details and just the task at hand is definitely the way to just get your mind out of the fawning and the
one step at a time. And also, I mean, you know, since we're talking about the record with Milton is a very kind and generous person. You know, he makes it easy for you to be around him. Like if he likes you, if he's messing with you, he makes it easy for you to just be in space. You know, he's telling stories. He's telling like something will happen with a song or in the room that reminds him of a story, and then he'll tell you a story and make sure you understand, you know, the punchline. And so it felt very you know, familial to be in the space and create. And we had work to do, you know what I mean? Like, he's a person who is very specific about what he's put into his songs and why, you know, down to like the voicing of a chord. And, you know, here I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to, you know, reharmonize some things, like do these little arrangements and this and that. And he was cool with a lot of the stuff that I proposed. And he would get so specific, like, oh, no, wait. No, that chord has to be those notes, because it really felt like there's like a poetry to how he puts the songs together. And because I'm not the poet, I don't know why he put that chord there instead of one that maybe sounds similar, but he does.
Yeah.
And so it was deep to learn about that specificity of his craft, that he's like, no, this chord has to be right there because it's doing something, you know, in the logic of the whole thing. And that was like a great, you know, lesson too, of that like kind of standing up for the specifics and then also being flexible to the new voice of somebody else who's hearing something new with what you made.
There is, I mean, it's fascinating to hear that there's these certain details that he feels need to be there, because he has such a, I don't even know I wouldn't know how to describe his music than that, you know, and there is, maybe it's just because they collaborated and I conflate them in my mind, but Wayne and Milton both have this, to me, ineffable quality to the music that's just so beautiful. And so, you know, just to hear that you're there and there are these sort of key, there's these things that are key to him and key to what he does. I mean, do you feel like you understand those things better now?
Oh boy. I don't know if it's understand, but I maybe feel his archetype as a creator more as a poet than before. I mean, I remember asking him once about his songwriting process. I think I was swooning over some lyrics and It's just like, how, but like, how did you do that? It was some image in a lyric. I was like, did you see that image first and then write it? Like, how did you, what was that process? I think I was asking more about like, what was the creative process? Did you sketch it? Was it somebody else's idea or a story you had in mind? Or, like, how did you craft it? And he just said, I'm a poet. That's what I do, And that landed at that time in relationship to like the construction of narrative in a song and getting a little bit closer to that singularity and that specificity around the musical elements are like, oh, I'm not a poet. I don't identify as a poet, but I can appreciate that craft where like there's a science, there's a math, like what the sensorial image that you want the person to receive, like their imagination has to put your symbols together. And there's like this like chemical reaction, like imaginative chemistry where like, oh, they get the sensorial image.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's gotta be those words and that sequence and that part of the poem. And I think I perceive him doing that with all the parts. The timbre of his voice, what register he's singing in, the instrumentation, the texture, the harmonic progression, the intro, the outro, he's doing that kind of like architecture, And I do think, I don't want to conflate them either, Wayne and Milton, because they're such distinct singularities, and that intentionality, that care into the minutia, that care of the minutia is something that Wayne definitely embodied and practiced down to he wrote every note of his symphonic scores by hand. Now, with pen. So, the whole score, all the instruments in the symphony, he wrote every note, every single note and stem and line and sharp and with pen by hand. And the symphonic music he was writing always had like a big theme, a big story or feeling or idea. And he would be writing into the note. In that passage of the music, it would be some aspect of the larger theme, So he'd be writing into the note like the intention of that part of the music, like with his hand from his heart. He'd be, like imbuing the note head with that idea.
Just the way he
just he would be like thinking about it and like, yeah, this I want this third violinist, I want this oboist to like feel this right here. So I'm gonna write that in to the phrase. And then you zoom out and you're like, okay, a 25-minute symphonic piece that this person wrote, and every single note that he wrote is like imbued with this like message and prayer or intention for the player.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. It's like a whole ecosystem, So anyway, they're both their own singularity, and maybe that depth of care and thoroughness is something that we could say, I've witnessed in each of them, in their own ways.
It's interesting too, because I guess sometimes I think there's the temptation with things with music to just think that things just are like there are plenty of, I think, happy accidents that occur in music making, but not everything is like there are like there are some things that are intentional and specific to these people that they go out of their way to imbue their music with.
When you talk about happy accidents, it makes me think of well, yes, there are lots of happy accidents, and it's like, well, what do you do with those happy accidents? That to me is where the brilliance happens, because there's so much happening real time when you're playing or improvising or composing even. Wayne used to always say composition is improvisation slowed down. So yes, these things will like, emerge. Yeah, I know. He's full of Yeah.
That's it.
He would say, playing is composition sped up and composition is soloing slowed down. But yes, these miraculous, you're trying to play one voicing and like, ooh, your hand falls on another one. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But what's compelling, I guess, where the like brilliance lies in any artist is like what you see in that, the potential that you recognize in the quote unquote happy accident, and how you shift it, how you integrate it. And on the record, we on the Milton and Esperanza record, we really wanted to do this Wayne Shorter song, When You Dream, because of course we were thinking of him from sunup to sundown, being in Brazil with his dear friend, and Leo Genovese was there, and Leo was very close to Wayne. Actually, the last Grammy Wayne won, he won with Leo Genovese. Really? It was the first time that two jazz instrumentalists shared the same Grammy for best jazz performance.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, incredible player, incredible composer. Yeah. So
you play with a lot too.
Yes. So we're in this room, and all of us in the room had some kind of a connection to Wayne. He had departed. In his own last words, he said, I'll be back soon. I gotta go get a new body so I can continue the mission. So we're all just, with that immensity of his influence on our life, and being in the studio with Milton, and we wanted to do this song, and I had done this whole arrangement. I spent weeks prepping it, and it was not working. It was just not working. And I could feel it, and I could own that it wasn't working, but we just wanted to do it so bad, So we're like, we keep, carving at it and trying to rework the clay, and it's just not happening. And then we like stopped. I felt so defeated. I was like, Then I started remembering or hearing Wayne's voice of like, you gotta have fun. We're supposed to have a hell of a good time, in everything. If you're not having fun, why do it, And it's kind of like we started sharing these like quotes and things that we had heard, remembered him saying or doing. And then we like threw the arrangement away, and we said, let's just go for broke, let's just play it. The melody is alive in us, and we're gonna like let whatever tumbles out. There's this line from a great poem that the police tumbled out of the back of a van like oranges. Anyway, it's like that feeling of like, it's just
tumbling out.
Yeah, just tumbling out. Whatever gravity is working on you, the forces of the world working on you, let it go. And you could say the whole song is like this unfurling cascade of happy accidents, because we didn't have like an arrangement in mind. We were in real time responding to the cascade of, encounters from what each of us was playing that felt fun or felt good. And I feel like that what ended up on the record is this beautiful portrait of like, when you usher in, or you steward, or you trust the kind of chaos of many brilliant people pouring out, the ingredients for happy accidents to happen sequentially through the song.
I think, it's like that was one of the things, Quincy Jones just died too. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things people kind of talks about with him in terms of just the way he arranged sometimes, mm-hmm. was like just getting people who were really good at what they did and mm-hmm. you could trust and just
mm-hmm.
let them go. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's a similar thing. Like if you have mm-hmm. players who bring a certain thing to the table, it's like let them do what they do.
Exactly.
Why?
That's step one of good producing is, I guess you can, because sometimes you're brought in to produce and it's already a group of people that you don't necessarily have history with. But I like the agency and it's almost like a composition of people. The composition process starts with the people of just what you said. You know how the chemistry of the folks work, kind of like the chemical reactions of this group of people. And, I mean, Quincy was definitely a master at that. But all great band leaders, that's what they're doing, I think about like Terry Lynn Carrington, who's a
Amazing
phenomenal
drummer.
producer, phenomenal arranger, drummer, yes, band leader, all the things. And it's like, she can like foresee miracles between players that I think most people wouldn't give the opportunity to flourish. And she particularly kind of has that eye with like the potential of young musicians. It's like maybe they're not quite there today, but she can like sense or smell like, but if I bring them into this band with that person, that gift, that thing that they have is gonna open up and flourish in the right, chemical reaction with the other parts that are here. And that is maybe a easy to miss superpower.
Yeah. Do you think you have that?
I may, but I don't have a lot of opportunity to find out because I play with the same people. I have been so lucky to encounter these players through my life that are just, just gems. Yeah. Just so like Leo, like folks in this band, Eric Dube, Matt Stevens, Morgan Guerin, Justin Tyson, Corey King, these ones who I just know. Like I trust them so deeply, and to the point where I also know they won't let me jump off any cliffs that I can't fly back from. You know what I mean? And that's also people that can give you like honest critique and honest feedback. So I'll say maybe I have that skill, but I'm not putting myself in the circumstances to flex that muscle fully if it's indeed there.
It's probably there.
Yeah, okay. I will find out. Maybe.
You kind of from the beginning have just been producing your own records.
Yes, I've been producing my records since the first record. And in, I guess, 2006. Whoa, that's weird. Yeah, well, I guess I produced in 2005 and it came out in 2006.
20 years ago.
That's shocking. Whoa, when you put it like that.
Not to put a too fine a point on it, but 20 years ago.
It is. I'm like, whoa, is that true? Yeah, and that's, I don't want to say that's easier, but I feel it's a really different creature when you're producing in a way that's ushering someone else's vision, into fullness. I have immense respect for the producers who do that for a living,
But I can't imagine producing your very first record is any easier because you're kind of like, I mean, now you know what to expect of yourself in this situation. Going into produce another artist, you might not know. That's like, but like, so I mean, in the sense of your first albums, and you're kind of like an unknown entity to yourself in some ways in the studio, as much as a strange or someone you're producing for the first time. So it's got to be scary. It had to be weird.
Well, the truth about that first record is I wasn't planning for that to be some sort of like representation of me as an artist. At that time in my life in music, I was playing all kinds of records. Yeah. I was playing on anybody and everybody's record because I was in school. And you're making records left and right. You're going down to the studio from the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. recording session. You're just playing and doing things. I had made a lot of little demos for myself. And, when this label called Ava, AYVA, approached me, they were like, hey, you want to do a record with just a project that you have? And I was like, cool. I had this little, I don't want to say whatever, but just two of the many dozens of people that I was doing projects with. It was Arwan Ortiz and Francisco Mela.
It's a good band.
Yeah. But I mean, again, 20 years ago, like we didn't know who Arwan Ortiz and Francisco Mela was going to become. They're teachers and students in Boston. So I was like, hey, you guys, you want to get in the studio and make a record for this Spanish label? Like, cool. I mean, it didn't have like gravitas. It didn't have like weight, right. We had been doing tons of gigs around Boston with various configurations with, those two folks. And so we just went in the studio, played some of the stuff we played some improvised stuff. Cool.
No overthinking it.
Yeah, I'm thinking like, this is going to be some little like niche record from this niche label in Spain.
Yeah.
The end. Next, kind of like thank you. That was a nice little archive of this band, this local Boston project. Cool. Like, what's next? Then I have played a song by a phenomenal Argentinian composer called Cuchileguizamon. I'd heard a version that Liliana Herrero and Juan Falú did of this song called Cantor de Yala, which is on the record. Thank you. I love that song.
Incredible performance.
And also check out Juan Falú and Liliana Herrero because their version. Anyways, at a Spanish management company, there happened to be a man from Argentina. So when this teeny little label was shopping the album, looking for, promotion, they shopped it to this other Spanish company, and they're like, no, we're not taking projects, like, what, we don't do this free jazz stuff, like, whatever. But then one Argentinian guy was like, wait, what? Why is this black girl in Boston know this Argentinian composer? And just because of that, this company reached out and they were like, okay, who are you? What are you doing? Kind of thing.
Wow.
And then that was the only album that I had made technically. So that became my first record. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
in a way you didn't expect it to be like a calling card or
not at all. And even looking back, I'm like, that is just okay. Yeah, cool. It's almost like, if you can, I think My Beautiful Face helped, but I was like, if y'all can listen to that, I guess I can do anything.
Really? You don't think
it?
I've listened to that, your first two records in a long time.
Okay.
They're really good. They're really good. Because I feel like artists, sometimes you get like a narrative, either maybe you embrace a certain narrative or people overlay a narrative on. And I feel like sometimes, like, or if I were to just think about it, like, I feel like maybe the narrative is like that you've stretched out a lot, and you obviously have you've done so much, but like, but that those are kind of more just straight ahead, just kind of like offering. But like when I put them on, I was like, whoa! I was kind of surprised at actually how good they really are.
Thank you. Yeah.
Not that you're not great, but
I
it's
hear
like,
you. Yeah, I was 20 years old,
and not to be discounted. I don't think
I receive it. It's and hey, hallelujah. I do think
you're like,
I do think of the ways you can come into the music industry. Just looking back now from that perspective, it's funny. It's funny. It's kind of like cheeky. It actually matches the truth of my personality. It's funny that the first record was this like weird, random, kind of avant-garde trio free thing with these two Black Cuban men who were musically way freakier than what's even on that record. I like that there's something kind of like trickstery about that being the first calling card. And in a way, when anybody wants to say like, you're taking it too out, or like, do that sunny side of the street, I'd be like, no, there's a precedent here. There's a precedent here for being, on the edge. Yeah.
Do you think you would have, if you had known that was like going to be?
Oh, I would have done it completely different. Of course.
Do you think you would have overthought it, or do you think you would have
done different stuff?
Would you have done? Like,
absolutely.
Looking back, what do you think you would have done?
Looking back, I would have put my songs, like my own songs on it. I would have sung more. I would have had arrangements, more like horn arrangements and vocal arrangements. And I'm sure I would have done that, especially if there was the lack of oversight like there was, because it was like a father-son duo who ran this whole album. And there was like free artistic license. Like, it was really just like, here's the funds, just bring us a record. Like, whatever you want to do. And it was a short timeline. So I was like, all right, who am I already have a thing with? Oh, you two, we've been doing gigs all season. Let's go in the studio real quick.
It's kind of the classic way. I don't know. Like, that's a great way of,
I
like,
agree.
Is that like it's not a terrible way of doing it?
I just don't feel like the album's like representative of the portrait of the artist. And then not the problem, because I like the second record, Esperanza, but what I'll say is then other people's money and agenda was wrapped up in the album I was making. And so I will never dismiss or disregard the incredible support and work that first kind of swath of like my team did for me. They fought for me so hard, and all this stuff that's like, I mean, of course, it's my hard work and my great music, but like all these opportunities that keep tumbling, talk about tumbling out from those early days of my career are really thanks to, the devotion and the like hustle and the whatever was driving these men, in the industry who like,
who were those? Who were these men?
It was Montuno Productions, and it was Dave Love, and it was Concord Records. It was John Burke and Mark Wexler. And, these ones who like, ooh, they saw like, ooh, we know what to do with this. It was that kind of like, I'm going to say they saw the commodity value. And it's not I'm sure they cared about me as a human on levels, and they're in the music business, and their job is to sell music and artists.
As a commodity.
And I remember having these conversations with the label. My first album came out on Heads Up, which hadn't yet been purchased by Concord, then aka Universal, or then they're whatever you call it, the overarching company's Universal.
Conglomerate.
Thank you.
No, I don't know if that's the right word.
I think it is. So, or parent company or whatever.
Yeah.
So I remember, I wrote a lot in those days. I had like so many songs, so many arrangements, and I remember the head of the label being like, "But we have this grid. You have to, the songs have to fit in these categories on the grid, and so you can't put that
literal
a grid." It was like, songs that have this vibe, songs like a ballad, like da 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 da, and it actually became a joke between me and the musicians. Like, hold on, don't mess up the grid. Wait, now we can't. Make sure don't the grid's gonna get you. And this is like, where's the hook of the song? I was like, hook of the song? Don't you know what kind of musician I am? Ain't no hooks and whatever. So at my little 22-year-old self, I remember this like icky kind of tug of war with these humans who had more experience than me, were older than me, saw me as a kiddo who didn't know what I was doing, and were really putting a lot of pressure on me to make these decisions about the music that was going to end up on this record.
Yeah.
And I did fight and push, but it was a tug of war. So that means there are compromises that I felt like I had to make because these were the money people and the folks who like knew the industry. And I didn't know, of course, their ultimate agenda was like, you have the potential to be big in jazz. You know what I mean? I was trying to.
Were they saying that to you though?
No, because you would never say that to somebody,
Some people
and I don't know if my brain would have registered the depths of, the power dynamics at work there with all these like white businessmen who were seeing this like young, they were my representation and my label and my, so here I'm this like little young, like naive critter who's just like, I just want to make neat songs. You know what I mean? I don't think I could have comprehended the layers at work there in the whole dynamic, but they could. they definitely could comprehend the layers of potential and, income potential and commodity potential and brand potential and all the things. So all that to say, from Junjo to then the first album, like to Esperanza, it's a great album. I'm like, wow, yes, I can stand by it. And I feel very aware of the compromises. Down to the budget was what it was, which wasn't great. And so for the engineer to really do the job, like the great engineer to do the job, they wanted producer credit, and stuff like that. And you're like,
did you have to deal with that? Did you have to negotiate?
I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I wasn't paying attention to that part of the contract negotiations. My manager was doing it, who was also friends with the label, who was friends with you know what I mean? So you're not tracking this at 22. You don't know how the music industry works yet. And this is not a sob story. I'm so grateful everything that happened. Yeah. It just
is what it is.
It just is what it is. And it's things like also how I think like labor gets invisibilized, I think especially early on, for the sake of, people want a cut of the narrative or a cut of the credit or a cut of the whatever. Yeah. And, I'm sure the people in the room will tell you the musicians produced that record. I produced that record. I chose the music. It was like, but my name's not on there as a producer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are elements in that record that I roll my eyes about now because they were decisions made for the grid. For someone in the industries, talking about jazz music as industry, feels like a joke.
I didn't want to.
It feels like a joke.
No, but
for some people, it is their industry, and that's how they pay their mortgage. And so,
it's a slim margin. Let's be
It
honest,
is a slim little margin, but it's doing its thing.
You don't got a lot of room for error. So maybe
right.
So I guess that's where the grid comes in.
I guess that's where the grid comes in. It's just now at 20 years later, am clarified that then it was about what it's still about for me now, which is, putting the sounds that you're hearing into the world. That's the assignment. That's what I think the assignment is. And I really say no when the option is, hey, put this thing on this record that's going to live in the world forever for the sake of potential, I don't know, like it could go further, quote unquote, or you could sell more, or I'm always going to say no if it's an either or between that choice or the representation of what we heard, what the musicians felt, heard, saw, and were able to craft in a way that someone else could hear it and see it.
Do you think there's more truth in that, spending more time getting exactly what you hear in your head, or in just getting out what you can in the moment?
Well, I don't mean what we heard in the sense of like a tyrannical, it must match exactly the image in my brain. That's not what I mean. By what we heard, I mean what's true.
Okay.
And what we heard can encompass what happened when we started with the sketch.
Yeah.
But these 5 people in a room, found another thing. And, it's more about the truth. It's more about telling the truth of who we are, and the we is the humans who have dedicated this time to be doing this and nothing else to create this thing called music. That is so mysterious. And I feel so holy. I don't mean it in any particular denomination or religious paradigm or cosmology, but, I think whatever the word holiness is trying to speak to of a something that is possible or is amongst us in this world, I feel the presence of this thing that I would use the word holy to describe, that emerges when people are making music. And that thing, that you used the word ineffable earlier, that feeling or presence is the thing that I want to share. That to me, that is the thing worth efforting to carry, to give,
capture, to give
it to each other, and to give it to somebody who's gonna take some of their time out of their life to listen to you. That's I think that's a big ass deal.
Yeah.
Your attention, your time, that's all you have. And we don't know how long any of us are going to be on this earth. And a human being, another human being that I don't even know, that doesn't even owe me anything. I'm not even their family. Being oh yeah, okay, cool. I will dedicate some of my time, some of my attention to this thing that was created. I feel it's our responsibility to just try to just deliver that holiness that we can conjure, accompany, usher through us. And I think somewhere I knew these things at 20, but I didn't have the confidence to fully advocate. And I wanted to honor the investment other people were making in me. So I made a lot of eye-rolling concessions. But now there's no people like that around. So now I feel like I can stand by the last few records and be yep, that's what we meant. That's exactly what we meant.
But it came from, it's interesting though that those compromises did come from a good place in you, in that you're at least it came from, I just want to honor that these people are trying to do something. And
or just getting tired of arguing.
Okay.
Or just being well, that's what we got on tape. That person can't come back in the studio, so let's make the best with what this is,
Yeah.
And also, the contract that you sign coming into the world to be an artist isn't everything I do will be perfect. I just was watching this beautiful excerpt of an interview with Maya Angelou last night, who's talking about recognizing that she's a being in process. Above all else, she's a being in process. So she doesn't try to affix herself to any version that worked in the past, and nor is she even fully committed to stating this version of who I am, what I think, what I'm giving is final, because we're in process.
Yeah.
And I feel it's really important for musicians of all ages, but I want to say especially young musicians, to stand by the archive of what they give to the world, because the archive also teaches about our evolution as creators.
Yeah.
You know, there's things that I've done that they're out in the world forever, and I cringe, you know, and it's like, well, that's part of the archive that shows a human in process, in evolution, and that's what is interesting to me, I guess, about being on this journey of being someone who creates, that you can be like, yep, that's what I was tripping on, listening to, reading, and I really wanted to share it forward. Now, maybe I completely disagree with that, but there you have it. And now I can show the evolution from there to here.
Yeah. That's why I really also respect like people like, well, the people who are around, like, I mean, I guess Miles too, but that's more of his estate, but like Bob Dylan and Neil Young, who like, they're guys who still actively make records, but they also are constantly just going through their archives and releasing old sketches of things. Like, you know, and you're like, it's really valuable. It's really valuable to hear.
I think of Joni Mitchell too.
Joni, same.
Joni, I mean, I think you're kind of talking about big names, but I think Jerry Allen was also doing that. I just last night was listening to the Mary Lou Williams Collective, and you know, that sounds so different than Grand River Crossings, which sounds so different than the trio work with Paul Motion and Charlie Hayden at the Vanguard, which sounds so different than Timelines. I'm just like, whoa, you know, whoa, here is a person who's like letting however the last project metabolized, like what it brought, like, you know, letting that point to whatever's next. It's really possible. I mean, Wayne Shorter is a person like that. Milton Nascimento is a person like that. Terry Lynn Carrington is a person like that. You know,
I also love the way Milton return. Like, there's so many versions of Milton doing his own.
Oh yeah.
Song, you know, and you're like, on any given, he's like, I love the first record.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love all those songs.
Yeah.
But then it's like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to go just hear it, like the CTI version,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
that
yeah.
he did later. Or, you know, and that is also
there it
incredible.
is.
At what point do you feel you finally were able to put something into the world that felt like this is what I intended to put out?
I really feel that 12 Little Spells is what I intended to put out. Like, I feel like and Emily's D plus Evolution. Maybe it started with Emily's D plus Evolution. But also, at each point of creating or putting the records out, like, okay, we can release. I mean, I signed off on like, okay, we can release this, you know? So I'll say that, you know, I can stand by them all. And I remember the feeling of Emily's D plus Evolution being like, you know, like nobody was in the way on this one. And also with 12 Little Spells, it just felt so protected, you know, like it felt so much about the folks in the room were only people who really cared about the music we were making and really delivering like the potential, the fullest potential of what these creators around this theme and this body of work could give. And I want to leave, you know, the future open to maybe answer that question in 10 years and be like, oh, actually, it was the one that, you know, happened 8 years from today.
Yeah, to the Maya Angelou point of never feeling like affixed to a, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It could be the one 8 years from now.
Yeah, yeah. And also, just because to like puncture the potential of grandiosity or narcissism to swell in this conversation, like it's also like, yes, I think music is one of the most powerful holy forces on earth, and it's also just music, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's also not that deep. Like
Yeah.
we, it's not like we make songs and we play them and we put them out in the world. And it's like, just to be able to do that and make a living do that, like, good night. We're done here. Fantastic. Everything's working. Good. Let's go plant a garden. I also just don't want to get too precious or too concerned, or I don't know, make it like a bigger deal than it needs to be. We're just doing our job. This is my job. I do this for a living, and I do this out of the deep passion in my heart that I have for creating and for sounds and for working with people. And like the worst thing that we could do, some records like, oh, that's awful. That was all compromised for the forces of industry. So I was like, and
Right.
so what?
Also not that deep.
Yeah, it's not that deep.
Yeah.
It's not that deep. Somebody's out there making the record,
Yeah.
We're just one little cell in the body of music on this earth. And that is such a privilege. So I feel like even sometimes younger musicians will have this kind of like almost like desperation in their voice. Like, how do you find your voice? Like, how do you get into the industry and like find your voice and do your thing? And I can remember that kind of like pressure, that feeling of pressure, like, I got to go do something as a grown up now and make this thing I've invested in work. And I also try to remind them, like, you can't help it. You can't, whatever the hell you are, even if you just want to do Lady Gaga covers for the rest of your life in a club in South Korea and, or whatever, do Elvis impersonation, like whatever the hell your thing is, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be what it is. And the main thing is, are you enjoying doing it? Can you do it? Do you want to do it? Mm-hmm. And just in this life to get to find a thing like that, you're winning.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like whatever you can find at this point in time, that's a thing that you like, that you do, that you sound like, even if you think you're faking it, great. Do that, and that's great. And then make sure you call your elders, help your friends who have kids, support folks who are disenfranchised, pay attention to your local politics, engage. You know what I mean? It's like, kind of like, don't fill your brain with all these existential concerns of the arts. Like, you're a human in a world, and this is the job you get to do. And if you just keep doing it, it's going to work. Yeah. Don't worry. And now make sure you pay attention to all the other stuff, because we can get very self-absorbed. Ooh.
It's amazing though how you can't just accept. Like, it's at a tender age, it's hard to just accept. Like, you could know that to be the absolute truth, and it's really hard to sometimes accept that. All right, because I can remember similarly those same things. Like those feelings. Like it's very hard to. It's
hard, and we're being bombarded with the like messages of the hero. I'm using Leah Penniman's phrase, the hero industrial complex. This idea of like, it doesn't count unless I'm the hero. Like, it doesn't count unless I am the star.
Right.
And that is that's an ominous weight when you have a gift, or you have this thing that you love to do. Like, oh, I love to play piano, and I really like I love soul music, and but we don't have a lot of glorified images of like a side person or a happy producer or an arranger, like a person who does film scoring. They're living their best life. Yeah. So I feel particularly for musicians, this is kind of like this pressure of like, oh my God, what do I have to do to like make it, on top, or like get my aesthetic together or whatever. And that feels like pressure and concern that can be kind of a waste, and I just wonder about musicians that are pushing themselves past the place that they'll actually derive the most pleasure and be able to contribute the most because of this kind of pressure to be more, do more, win. And I think that also when we get the kind of very two-dimensional representations of the artists that we love so much, they're completely decontextualized from their family, their community, their elders, their teachers, their students. So it can also be really hard to get a sense of, an artist at work in their ecosystem. Yeah. And the music industry is not interested in your long-term wellness. Yeah. Yeah. So it's also something about maybe what I really mean when I was just being mean, like, don't become a narcissist. I think what I really mean is like actually learning how to cultivate one's gift in a healthy balance with being available to and in accountability to your community is actually the most sustainable and nourishing, soul nourishing way to go about this. And you can't sustain as a musician if your soul isn't nourished.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what I'm really trying to speak to.
You know, what's interesting, I mean, you know, you're right. Like there aren't, like I was reading when Benny Golson passed away, I found
Rest in power. Benny Golson.
I found a what do you call it? An oral history interview that he had given maybe in like 2002 or something. And I was reading through it, and he was talking about Oliver Nelson going to Hollywood to score film and TV. And, you know, I mean, sadly, Oliver, you know, doesn't live there. He passes away in like the early 71, 72, at 40, 41, 42, you know, like, but you think about it, like I was thinking about Oliver Nelson, and it's like, here's this person with an immense talent that I don't think, unless you really care about the music, like you might not know, you're not gonna, his name's not gonna, you know, feel
not
familiar like a Duke
name.
Ellington
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So, but it's like, here's this guy who like had all that talent, led a band, like, and probably had desire, probably wanted to continue to lead a band, but it's like, well, what was available was to go do this work and doing film and TV. Yeah. And like, I think Benny's point, if I'm remembering correctly, was like, people kind of looked down on it a bit, but then also a lot of people started going to him for work too, you know? And so at some point it's like, you kind of just, you know, you do the work you can where you're able to do it.
That's
and
right.
It's like, who cares?
And,
like,
well,
you know, like,
the funny thing is, you know, it's uncomfortable to admit, or it's uncomfortable to broach the subject, but there are the strands of desire for validation woven into our pursuits of notoriety, right? I mean, isn't that part of what notoriety is? You have a lot of people in your inner circle and outer circle validating the value of what you do. And I don't know what you do with that. That can be a very powerful motivating force that gets people practicing or finishing that song or getting that heartbreak out into a tune that becomes a hit that reaches somebody in the remote corner of the world that needed to hear that song that made them want to get up that day. You know, it's like, it's not to judge the motivation, but it's something to check out, because it begs the question like, what's going on with the musicians who are not as attached to the external validation, but are deeply invested in the relationship with their music and deeply passionate about finding and cultivating and creating, and maybe don't see themselves as ever having, because of how they look or their stature or their class or who knows what. And it changes across different decades, but who either are not motivated by that potential for validation or don't believe that they have, you know, whatever it is to even go achieve that validation, and instead turn that energy towards their other things. Yeah. And, you know, a la the story about Oliver Nelson, and really so many. I can think of about 35 people just off the top of my head who are not interested in that part of it, the external validation, and or maybe of their own self-esteem, or, you know, messages they've gotten from the industry about like, oh, you don't quite fit, you know, what's expected of how you're going to show up. And they have thriving, economically viable lives in music. And that's just something to know about, you know, it's something to contemplate. And I think for artists creating, I don't think we should ever shame our motivations, ever. I don't think we should ever like shame or feel humiliated about the shadow motivations that maybe get us from point A to point B. But that doesn't mean that we can't investigate them. Yeah. And once we become aware of them, you can make decisions. Informed decisions. Like, ooh, am I staying up all night, every night, hustling on this project because I I just want to be seen as being able to do, or like whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe, is that what I really want to do? Or is it for the money? Or is it for the, and do I like that? Is that what I want to be driven by or invested in? And like, there's no wrong answer.
Yeah,
It just
if you want to be driven by the money in that moment, and that it, like, sometimes it's best just to admit it.
I'll tell you right here, right now, the only reason that, not the only reason, but the main reason that I propelled myself forward to go like accept this scholarship at Berkeley and move to Boston when I was very happy in Portland is because somebody I had a crush on went to MIT. And I was like, oh, well, I'll be in Boston. Like, I'll be closer. Like, maybe, I like worked out this whole fantasy in my mind. And it's like, is that a petty? I was 17 years old, but hey, that the passion got me there.
Yeah.
I never saw that person again, but I was in Boston and my life blossomed. So it's just something about the exercise of investigating the motives and then, like you said, making informed decisions. Yeah. And it's, when I think about how messed up and, sick and egotistical and womanizing and abusing some of my favorite musicians were, it's like, wow, medicine and beauty can really come out of anywhere.
How do you square that? I guess just medicine. You do.
Well, we're more than. I think we're all more than our shadows. We're all more than our wounds. We're all more than our egos, and we're all. Let me not say more. We have a lot of qualities. We have a lot of things to give, and I don't believe that. A person's folly or humanness is grounds for dismissing the totality of their contribution. So a person who's abused women, who has, betrayed people's trust or been engaged in womanizing behavior, if they've made some medicine that helps me identify like my gifts and nourishes me and helps me heal and move forward in my life, I'm going to use those gifts.
Yeah.
I'm going to use them wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I might investigate some of their, guidance or testimony about what it is to be a human as well. I might look at it with like a little grain of salt and be like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, allowing that immensity of complexity and contradiction that's inherent in being a human is an important thread of like abolitionist work too. And I really, I couldn't call myself an abolitionist because I'm not doing the work actively in community. But I'm wearing my Innocence Project sweatshirt, which is definitely a part of abolition work. But I feel abolition and the work of abolition asks all of us to embrace the totality of our humanity and know that we are all in process and know that none of us are only the worst things that we've done or the most harmful things that we've done. Yeah. So it's almost like the same way that dimensions of abolition ask that we still consider folks who have done heinous things members of our community that we're responsible for. It's kind of like you practice that internally with the members of your internal community, or the internal community of the artists or craftspeople or creators or philosophers or whoever whose work is nourishing you. It's almost like by taking in their work, they become a part of your community.
Yeah.
And it's like
in ways that are instructive too. Like I feel like sometimes when you cast away or write off people who have done even heinous things, let alone just maybe morally a little off-putting, like you're almost like not. Almost sometimes I feel like it's you're then casting. You can learn as much from the negative examples as the positive. And so it's like sometimes acknowledging that, wow, maybe I'm also capable of those things. Keeping those people as a part of your community, not completely writing them off, allows you to realize like we're all sort of capable of both really amazing things and really maybe also awful things. And how do you then how can I then actually make decisions to not do that thing, and maybe do more of that thing?
Yes. And I feel like the tricky part, yes, I agree with that. And I would add to it, the practice of tending community, which includes humans who have done things you don't agree with isn't just for what the benefit it can have to you. It also says something about, like, I'm actually willing to invest in the keeping of another human because they're another human. You know, that there's not a contingency on a person's right to be a member of community.
Yeah.
And I also think about the fear that maybe the subconscious fear that we have around tending really complex conflict and even what seems like antagonism, because most of us have never actually been through the cycle. Like, we don't know what's on the other side of saying, like, I think about, you know, what's been happening with what was happening a lot in a particular season in the jazz world of these educators or band leaders, it coming out that they had done these like really icky, not okay, violating actions, you know, towards students, like sexually inappropriate behavior.
And like we're talking
in the last
times?
like I would say like last decade. And this happened with a dear mentor of mine in Portland. And what I saw happening was this iron curtain or iron wall coming down. It's like, oh my God, we actually don't know how to deal with this. We actually don't know what reconciliation and community could look like. We don't know what accountability and repair could look like. We have so little idea that the only option on the plate is like, you have to go, like, bye. You don't exist anymore. It's like that. It's like whatever other connections or contributions up to that point, it was just like, you're out.
Yeah.
And that, I agree. It doesn't matter what I think, but I'll say just my little 2 cents in it all is like protecting people who have been violated. Absolutely priority number one. And what I feel that whole response exposes is how inequipped we are actually as humans in quote unquote community, whether that community is a institution or a field like jazz music, to like stay with the trouble.
Yeah.
To stay with the trouble and go like, actually, what if we don't just get rid of this person? Like, what is protection and repair and accountability and responsibility actually look like? And that like stew of questions feels like so scary that you're just like, you know, it's like, get out, I can't. And I hope for me and all humans and folks who have been through all sides of, you know, harm, I wish for us a more robust palette of options, you know, that we can utilize when harms happen, because we are gonna harm each other.
It's gonna continue.
That's right. We're really messed up, you know. Most of us are really just, by the time you get to the point of leaving your house and seeing another person, you already messed up. So
that's why you're in Portland, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess up in Portland too.
Well, I know.
It's just, that's, here we are, you know. So, yeah, I'll just add that I wish that for my community and musicians. I wish that for my community, my family, and the community of folks I work with in Portland, and really just anywhere there's humans who have the potential to harm. I wish for us to have a more robust, like I said, palette of tools and skills. And there are a lot of people who are tirelessly cultivating those practices, you know. So it's not like we're in a void. They're there. It just the images of carceral response is what we see the most often. So I think the knee-jerk reaction is to go to that.
It's our default.
Yeah, it's the default.
Yeah. So much more I want to talk about, but I'll do it another time. Thanks so much for making the time. Thanks for checking out Broken Record on YouTube. If you want to listen to us on the go, be sure to subscribe to Broken Record wherever you listen to podcasts.